Hello everyone, my name is Prakash Chandrachipa. I'm a PhD candidate at Machine Learning Group, Luleå University of Technology, Sweden. This talk is about learning self-supervised representations for label-efficient cross-domain knowledge transfer on diabetic retinopathy fundus images. So before getting into the actual topic, first we need to understand in general the motivation behind learning representation through label-free approaches. So it comes down to few limitations and the challenges with medical image domain, which is about the scarcity of label informations and ineffective transfer learning, and also the very distinct visual concepts present in the medical images compared to the natural scenes. So we discuss each and every point and in bit detail. So coming to the label scarcity part, the first and the foremost reason behind is that annotations in the medical image is to be done by the experts, which come down to the cost and the time consuming aspect. So this is the primary reason that in general medical images has label scarcity. Then the second aspect comes to the very high human error rates. Although the annotation are done by the medical experts, but in general the complexity medical images has and the detail it required in order to understand the concepts, it has a high human error rates. Then the device dependencies, the same cause and the same problem statement related medical images could have a very different characteristics because it is operated and generated through different devices. So one of the example for this, the histopathological images, where different institutions and different protocol required to have a different magnification details and the staining methods. So in general, there may be a multiple data sets. However, when it comes to the details, their characteristics and their different properties related to the detailing of magnification, the operating environment, it caused them not to use it in a very much combined manner. So, and the fourthly, it is about the privacy concerns, as medical data required to have a series of protocol in order to make it accessible for the research purpose. Then we come down to the transfer learning aspects. So in general, computer vision supervised transfer learning has been a big success when it comes to the knowledge transfer to the other domains. However, when it comes to the medical images, the knowledge transfer from natural scenes like ImageNet to the medical images, it has not been significantly improved the performance of medical imaging tasks. One of the primary reason could be a very much distinct visual concepts present in the medical images then it is present in the natural scenes. So there has been several studies has been done on the in order to understand the transfer learning perspective. However, the main point is that knowledge transfer from the natural scenes to medical images is not the very much direction where we could improve the performance of the downstreaming task on the medical images. So it required to introspect and identify the direction where we could move forward. Then coming to the aspect of the visual concepts in the medical imaging. So if we compare the natural scenes, we could understand it is very easy to understand in terms of the features and the concept present in the images. It does not require any specific detailings. However, when it comes to the medical images, and specifically we could see in the case of diabetic retinopathy images, it is not obvious to understand the detailing and the difference between one versus other, and that has bring the challenge that uh, the visual concepts and the discriminative features present in these two retina images is not very easy to understand, and which has motivate us to understand that however human is having an expertise on the domain, but it always lacks the interpretation for the domain specific properties. So with this all fact, uh, we could understand that that in general, medical visual domain has a lot of limitations with respect to the learning the better representations. However, we see in the coming slides that what could be potential methods which can mitigate this particular problem. And now we talk about a bit about that why even this diabetic retinopathy diagnosis is even important. So to cut down this detail, we could understand that the leading cause of the blindness in the working populations for the millions of the people is related to the diabetic retinopathy. Uh, Diabetic, which could be identified through the retinopathy diagnosis, and that has given us sufficient reason to investigate and work in this very much direction. Now, as we discuss the different challenges and limitations with respect to the size and the label details and the quality of the data sets and their labels in the medical images, and specifically the diabetic retinopathy fundus images, it comes down to the statement that we need a transfer learning method, we need a transfer learning mechanism, which should be pretty efficient, does not require very much human supervision in terms of annotation and other aspects, and is still able to learn the representation, which we could perform the knowledge transfer to desired task on the target data sets. With all these details, self-supervised representation learning has been one of the choice, and it has been a huge success on the natural scenes domains in last couple of the years, which inspire us to investigate self-supervised representation learning, how we could adopt it for the diabetic retinopathy images. So in this particular study, we focus on a specific approach of self-supervised representation learning, which is called contrastive learning. And we adopt this method from SimClear paper, where the contrastive learning is defined as it learns the similarity for the positive pairs, and the positive pair means two augmented views of the same images, and it learns the dissimilarity otherwise, which means it learns the dissimilarity for the negative pairs where the augmented views are from different images. Then it required a pre-training data sets. In that case, we use IEPACS dataset. It has 35,000 images having four categories of the diabetic retinopathy. However, we do not access to the labels as we intend to do the self-supervised representation learning here. So this is the whole idea how to adopt the self-supervised representation learning, specifically the contrastive learning for the diabetic retinopathy images. We could understand here that the multiple input, it creates the augmented views using geometric and color transformation, as it has been done on the original method in the contrastive learning, and it learns the similarity for the positive pairs and try to learn the dissimilarity across the negative pair. In this way, it is able to learn the underlying visual concepts and discriminative features within the retinopathy images, and it is to be believed that once it is learned those features, we could utilize the learned features and representation in several several downstreaming tasks in the knowledge transfer to the target data sets. So in order to see how well we learn the representations. So as we discussed already about the source data set on the pre-training part, we have three target data sets. One is APTOS, MESSIDOR, and the Fundus Images. And we could see all these three data sets, like APTOS has a 5 classes, where MESSIDOR has a four classes of different gradings of diabetic retinopathy, whereas the last data set, target data set, is Fundus, where we only have 747 example. However, it has 7 classes. So in general, we could understand that uh, in general, this diabetic retinopathy data sets are very much small scale data sets. So it this is the one of the reason that by learning on this data set its own might not be very much favorable in order to attain a higher accuracy for the diagnosis part. So the transfer learning is one of the mechanism, and within that we self-supervised transfer learning we explore, because it does not label information on the pre-training part, and it does not require the human annotation dependencies, which we discussed, that which has several limitations. Then the experiment evaluation part becomes that we evaluate on the two downstreaming tasks, binary classification and the multi-class classifications. Binary classification is about whether the given example it has a it identify the uh, diabetic or non-diabetic, whereas in the multi-class classification we see the severity level of the disease. Secondly, since self-supervised learning claims to learn effective representation, which can cut down the requirement of the label examples in the downstreaming task. So during the fine tuning, we might require a less label, and we will see this part also, that how well model has learned the representation, so it can reduce this requirement, and how much it could be reduced. Then the quality analysis, where we would like to understand the performance metrics in order to understand the class activation maps, that how well the representation has been learned, which supports the performance gain done by self-supervised representation learning knowledge transfer. Now we come to the actual result part. So the first is binary classification task, where we compare the result with the previous work. So in this table, we have several previous work compared with our work, and we have 3 different metrics: accuracy, precision, and recall. So the first half, the upper half of the table talk about the results on the MESSIDOR dataset. And it could be seen that using self-supervised representation learning on the IEEE task, it is able to learn the effective features which can be transferred when we do the downstreaming tasks by fine-tuning on MESSIDOR datasets. Similarly, for the APTOS datasets, we could see on all 3 metrics we are able to outperform the previous work. Similarly, for the multi-class classification task on APTOS dataset, we could see that by utilizing self-supervised representation learning and the knowledge transfer, we can improve the results overall. However, the results are not significantly improved, which could be investigated further by understanding the effectiveness and the limitations of the knowledge transfer. Then it comes to the other part of knowledge transfer about the label efficiencies. So as self-supervised representation learning claims to learn the effective representations, which should eventually cut down the requirement of the label information, the label examples. So here we could see during the binary classification that with the 20% label itself on the APTOS dataset, we can surpass the previous work. Yeah. Similarly, we could see with 50% label example itself, we are able to outperform the previous works. Similarly, we could see the results that when we use different labels like label from partially 10% to the fine tuning, performance of the downstreaming task on the classification eventually attains the better performance. So in the multi-class classification for the MESSIDOR dataset also, it is interesting to note that we could get comparable performance of fully supervised settings with the 50% label itself. And the similar pattern follows for the Fundus Images, Fundus datasets also in case of binary classification. However, for the multi-class classifications, difference between 50% and the fully supervised settings is significant. Then it comes to the quality analysis part, where we could see the APTOS datasets. So so here we could see a particular sample from the APTOS dataset where model is able to attend the region of interest with the activation, which shows that the representation learned through the self-supervision seems to be effective. And the very similar pattern we could see on the MESSIDOR dataset also. Finally, on the Fundus dataset also, we could see this when once the self-supervised representation learning is done on IEPACS dataset. So during the transfer, during the knowledge transfer, we are able to see network is able to identify the region of interest and put the attention that, and that could be the potential reason that self-supervised representation are able to outperform the other works which are based on either the supervised transfer learning or the transfer learning from the natural scenes. With that, we move ahead to the final part of the presentation about the conclusions. So briefly, we contribute to adopt the contrastive self-supervised representation learning on diabetic retinopathy images. This could be the one of the contribution for this whole study, and then the achievement part, it comes that by adapting the contrastive self-supervised representation learning on diabetic retinopathy images, we are able to achieve performance improvement on multiple downstreaming tasks across the multiple target data sets. And finally, the future work, we see that so far the investigation is focused on classification downstreaming tasks on the target data sets in the knowledge transfer. However, it would be interesting to see how well self-supervised representation learning supports and helps in order to improve the performance for the more challenging tasks like segmentations and detections. With that, I thank everyone.